Okay, this is going to be a quick walkthrough of what it might look like to automate a website. In this case, we're going to start with a online mortgage calculator. You can see right here that there's a number of informations that are on the screen, including a bunch of things you can fill out on the left with results on the right. For our purposes, let's take something like the loan amount. I'm going to change that to be $500,000. We click the calculate button. The page reloads. You can see things have changed a little bit. This right side moved a bit. There's a new ad, but there's a loan here. There's the monthly payment is there. It happens to include things like property tax and home insurance, but for the purposes of this, let's just run with it. Okay, perfect. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL, and let's switch over to Blue Prism. So let's make an object. Again, objects are the ways that you tell programs what to do. In this case, let's say Loan Tools is the name of our object. And let's make an action inside here that actually calculates our loan. Perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is start out with some of the information we know. This is going to be something we're going to start out knowing about what the loan is. This is the amount borrowed. This is going to be a number, and we need to store it somewhere. Perfect. So this is what we're going to be starting with. The next thing we need to do is learn a little bit about the website that we're going to be working with. In this case, Internet Explorer. We want it to launch a new browser. Here's the URL we just copied down. And let's get to the point where we tell some of the specifics. Okay, so there's some elements in here. I know I'm going to need 3 or 4 of them. Let's start with 4. I need a way to see which page I'm on. Let's call that the title. There's that loan amount that we were interested in. There's that calculate button. And then the last thing we're going to need is the monthly payment. Perfect. So let's start taking a look at this. First things, let's just tell it the model to launch. It pulls up the URL we told about. Now we can start telling it where some of these things are. So for the title, I'm going to grab something on this page that lets me know this page is here. Now in this case, I'm going to go with something like this, mortgage repayment summary. If we can see that, we know the page is up. So when we click on that, it actually brings up a number of things that it thinks might be useful to see if we're looking at what we think we're looking at. In this case, I'm just deselecting some of the things that came up with no values. But the important thing is when we click highlight, that it finds its way back to the portion of the screen we wanted. So perfect. There's one of them. Let's do the same thing for some of these other things, like, for example, the loan amount. I'm going to skip doing the deselections at this point. It should still work though. The calculate button, let's find that. Here it is. And then lastly, we want the monthly amount. Let's go get that. And where is it? Here we are, just that one line there. Perfect. So we have a model that we can work with. Let's close this for a moment. All right. First thing we do after we start, we need to be able to launch that program. So let's look at the model we just made. What we can do is we can start pulling in the actual model. We can tell it to launch. Then the next thing we want to do is see if it's actually loaded. So I'm pulling out a wait stage here. What this is going to do is it's going to wait till the page is actually loaded. We're going to know that by if that title actually appears. Now, what it's doing is it's going to wait exactly long enough to see that that particular portion is in existence, and then we'll get to move on. That's one of the ways we don't have to wait as long. We don't have to put in a fixed wait. It'll just wait just as long enough as it needs. So in this case, let's start interacting with the page. We want to put in our loan amount. We need to put in that loan that we started out with. That's that variable that we created in the start. Actually, come to think of it, we need to put a value in here so we can test with it. Here's an initial value. Let's put in our 500,000 since we're familiar with that one. After we write in that loan amount, the next thing we're going to need to do is click on the calculate button. So let's tell it calculate. And then we're going to click on it, give it a moment. And then we're going to need to wait one more time. We're going to need to wait to make sure the page actually comes back. Let's reorient this a little bit so I got a little more space. So in this case, we want to see that the page does in fact reload again. In this case, I'm going to wait for that value to come back, saying document loaded. Then we need to be able to read the new value from it. Let's get the monthly amount. Let us get the current value, and we can store that somewhere. It says value for monthly. That's perfect. And then the very last thing we're going to need to do is shut down the program that we started. So we can just go back in here and tell it to terminate. So let's connect these items together. And I'm just drawing lines between these. This is very much like Visio. Okay, let's take a look at that first and see how this goes. Let's run it to here. See, it pulls open the page, it waits till it's loaded, it's putting some information in, it's clicking the navigate button. We saw it reload there, and now we can see that it actually did get a value. Let me make this a little bigger so we can see it. It got the value, but we can see it's actually getting it with the $sign. Let's deal with that first here before we hand this back, before we call the object done. So what I want to do is I want to make a calculation stage here where we can clean up that text into a number. So what are we going to do? Well, let's do a couple formulas. First thing I want to do is I want to replace. Let's work with the text from value for monthly. And what we want to do is we want to replace that $sign with nothing. So here's our formula. We can take a look at it. We can test it. You can see it's nicely filling in the value that we already had. And we can see that the $sign's gone, but it's still text. So we're most of the way there. I'm going to copy this, but let's do one more formula, and that's going to be a data conversion. So we need to make this a number. Let's paste in the part that we already had, and we can see how this works. So starting with the text again, and here we go at the end. We're getting our number. And it's actually a number value. So let's store this somewhere. Let's store this in monthly. Monthly. Perfect. All right. And now we're basically to the end. What we could do is we could just say end here and hook these things together. But one more thing I want to do, remember how we had the start and we put some information that we needed to start? Well, now we have information at the end. Let's put that in here. This is the monthly payment. It's a number, and the value was this. So as far as object goes, we have a start. It's got data associated. We've got an end. It's got data associated with it. Let's take a quick look at it. We're going to publish this, and let's actually make our name a little more useful here. This is Loan Tools. This one is Calculate Monthly Payment. Perfect. So let's save this. Save. Now let's jump back to the main part of Blue Prism here, and let's create a process to work with it. Now we just made an object. Now we're making a process. What's the difference? The difference is that objects are how we work with applications. The processes are the business rules. This is what are we trying to do. This is what's the actual decision we're trying to make. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to work with that object we just made. It is the here we go in Loan Tools, and then Calculate Monthly Payment is the action we just made. We do need to populate it with something. Let's create that something right now. This is going to be one of the pieces of information we're going to start out with. This is the loan amount. Let's say amount borrowed, and this is a number. Let's store it in loan, but let's actually put some business logic in here. Let's say that we have a max payment we need to stay under. It's also going to be a number, and we go max payment. So with these two pieces of information, we have something to actually make a useful case here. Let's say, again, that $500,000 a month is our test value. Let's say our max payment a month is going to be $3,000. So with this in mind, when we actually invoke this and we tell it, hey, go check on this loan for $500,000. when this comes back, we need to do something with it. So, well, again, that was just a portion of it. So this is the input. But what we do need to see is what's the output. Here's the monthly payment that's coming back. Let's save that value. You can see it's right there. Now let's do something with it. Let's make a decision, and we'll see if we should approve this. Now, what would that be? That would be the monthly payment needs to be less than the max payment. Perfect. It doesn't look right. I think this should have been this. There we go. That looks better. Now, when that's done, we need to see what's going to happen here. So we've made a decision. Let's actually get a value out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a text value that says approved. And let's store that in our result. This is just a new variable I'm creating. And we can handle the other side of our decision tree by saying, you know what, this is not approved. So using that decision part that we just put in, we can hook these things all together. So we start, we calculate the loan payment, we make a decision. Now, the first leg we always pull off a decision is the yes value. This one's the no value. And then both of these are going to go to the end. What we want to do, though, is, sorry, let me get my cursor back. We want to be able to respond back with whatever that result was. So let's say result. Approval state. This can be text, and we get the value from result. Okay, so we've got inputs and outputs. It's all one big solid thing here. Yeah, let's see if there's errors. There's no errors. Let's save this. Actually, I need to publish it first. Publish. There we go. Now let's take a look at it. Perfect. Now, in our control room, we should have this loan approval process that we just made. We can drag it off to a runtime resource to run. In this case, when we tell it to start, it's going to ask us for some information. We'll give it our 500,000 and 3,000 a month. When we tell it to start, it will run. You can see it running in the background there. And when it's done, we should have some information in our log. Okay, we can see it started with the 500,000 and 3,000, and when it finished, it ended up with approved. Perfect. So that's one thing that's done beginning to end here. We actually have a working process, but let's do just a little bit more with it, because you want to be able to use this in other work cases. So in this case, let's take what we just made and let's expose it to the world through a web service. So I just did that. Let's take a look here. I'm going to open up Chrome. I'm going to go to localhost and pull up our web services panel. And we can see that here we now have this process that we just built. Here's the WSDL for it. I'm going to take this and copy it. And let's go into a program like SoapUI where we can test this. I'm going to put in this WSDL. Great. It builds our sample requests off the WSDL. We can see here there is a loan amount. Let's put in our 500,000. And let's put in our max payment. Let's say $2,000 a month. Now, the last thing we need to do is just be able to log into our Blue Prism. So in this case, I'm going to give it one of my credentials here. And let's say go. So what this is doing now is it's reaching out to Blue Prism. It's asking us through a web process if it can run a process for us. This is something you could include in some of your existing programs or automations that you might have in your systems. You can see that it came back and said, hey, that's not approved. $2,000 is not enough. This is a way we can take something external, build an interaction with it. You can see the object that is basically something that returns our monthly payment. And then we take our process to build some business logic around it. In this case, just working that monthly payment against a max payment for a specific person. And that's how we can take it and incorporate it into something that already exists at your company. Here we go, beginning to end. Thank you very much.